Now, just a day to go before elections in the U.S., President Donald Trump and his Democratic rival Joe Biden have been making their final pitches to voters. Trump has been holding campaign rallies in 5 battleground states. Meanwhile, Biden's campaign is focused on Pennsylvania. Trump believes he can pull off another surprise victory as he did 4 years ago. Most polls, though, have been showing Biden ahead in key states needed to win. Well, many eyes will be on the biggest swing state of all, Florida. It's been seen as a must-win for Donald Trump. The past 2 elections have seen a wafer-thin margin between the winner and loser there. President Trump is banking on the support of one of the state's main voting blocs, the Latino vote. DW's Carolina Chimoy has been to find out how the Republicans under President Trump have tapped into a narrative that's found appeal among Florida's Cuban Americans.
Trump 2020! Trump 2020!
They want to see Donald Trump stay in the White House. And they are determined to deliver Florida for him. It's a must-win state for the presidency. Even at this scaled-back Democrat rally in Orlando, the Trump voters are far louder.
Biden, you're not good for this country! You can stay in your basement!
Trump has strong support from a large part of the Latino community here in Florida. This despite things which would seem almost designed to put Latinos off, like the harsh words he has used to describe immigrants. I'm here to find out why the Hispanic vote leans more Republican here in Florida. Nearly a third of the Latino voters in Florida have Cuban roots, including Bertica Cabrera Morris, head of Latinos for Trump in Orlando. She was 15 when her family fled Cuba after losing everything to the government of Fidel Castro.
They just knocked one day at the door and they said, it's ours now. We had lost everything, you know. We had lost our beautiful home, the ranch, the chauffeur, but we had a different life, and you adapt. That's why voting is so important to me, because it's a gift that this country has given me that I didn't have. They took away.
One of her biggest fears, like many other Cuban Americans, is the idea that the system they fled could be adopted in the United States.
No, I don't think Joe Biden is a socialist or a communist, but I do believe the people around him are. And they have the same socialist ideas that I lived through in Cuba and I've seen in Venezuela. So yes, I do believe that he's surrounded with that. And a leader is as good as the people around them.
Being pro-Trump is slowly becoming something the president's supporters keep to themselves because there can be consequences. Mike, her plumber, is also a devoted Trump supporter.
So I have a present for you.
What's that?
I have
All right, Trump.
a shirt supporting our president.
Yeah, the last job I was at, he says, "You're not a Trump fan?" I said, "No, why?" Because I wouldn't let you do the job if you were a Trump fan. So I told her I was a Biden fan just to do the job. And that's the only way I could get the work.
It's not just the fear of socialism driving support for Trump.
We want Trump!
Many Latino voters are Catholic and support the Republican position against abortion. And it may seem counterintuitive, but many also support Trump's hard line on immigration, even from Latin American countries.
Lo que ha dicho es verdad.
Trump tells the truth. I don't want other Hispanics to come into the U.S., even if they are from my country, Peru. If they don't pay taxes, that is not fair. So if more Hispanics come and don't pay taxes, they steal and live off the money they get from the government, then I'm a racist too. And I also say, get out.
It's not fair that those that come through the border illegally paying a coyote $10,000 to come here and we don't know who they are. They could be rapists.
Here in Florida, support for President Trump and the Republicans is deeply emotional. If that support is reflected at the ballot box, it could decide the election.
Immigration policy will be a major issue for voters. Appearing to get tough on immigration has been at the heart of Donald Trump's presidency. The main agency in charge of deporting people without legal documents is the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, known as ICE. And many live in fear of its reach. DW correspondent Carolina Chimoy sent us this report from the state of Georgia.
Adelina Nichols is a defender of immigrants' rights. She wants them to know that they don't need to hide where they come from. Her organization, GLAR, the Georgia Latino Alliance for Human Rights, has been working on this for 19 years, until recently in dialogue with the federal government. But that channel of communication to talk about immigration is cut off by the Trump administration, she says. Obama deported a lot of our people. However, there was room to negotiate immigration policies. It was a political fight. Now, on a federal level, that is not possible anymore. This is why they now work on a local level, going from door to motivate people to vote. They hope to elect politicians who will work with them on immigration reform and prevent deportations. This man from Central America, who wants to remain anonymous, had lived in the U.S. for 6 years with his family. Then one day in 2012, he was stopped by ICE agents. They took him to the Irwin County Detention Center.
There, everyone cries. Even the strongest men cry. I saw it, a big man, another one with a mustache, and all crying, because there is no certainty that you'll ever get out.
After 3 months in detention, he was released, with legal help from Adelina's group, who showed he had no criminal background. Under the current administration, his release would not have been possible.
The American dream doesn't exist anymore. Today, it's more an American nightmare, especially with this president.
He now constantly fears he could be arrested again. On any given day, around 50,000 people are in migration detention in the United States. Human rights advocates report cruel conditions, and they say it has even gotten worse under the Trump administration. A system that is unlikely to change overnight, even with a different administration. But change at the top could at least reopen that door to dialogue.
Let's bring in William Glucroft here from our U.S. election team. Good to see you. So, Florida, very complicated demographically. How important is it in this election?
Complicated is a nice way of putting it. It's often the butt of a joke in America, politically, socially, culturally. I mean, there are social media accounts that follow all of just the crazy news that sometimes comes out of Florida. That said, it is an extraordinarily important election. Almost every winning president in recent history has won Florida, and you can't really win the presidency without winning Florida. And it's such a diverse state. 17% of registered voters in Florida are now Latino. Which is a huge amount of voters, but also we have a huge retirement population. We have rural white voters. You have a large Jewish population. You have an increasingly young population. All of these are competing groups, and you know we talk about Latino, but that in itself is a diverse group. We're talking about people coming from dozens of countries, or their previous generations have come from dozens of countries with hundreds of experiences. You know, when we talk about, for example, in comparison, Black Americans, 80 to 90% of Black Americans vote Democrat. They're a much more reliable, politically speaking, electorally speaking, a much more uniform group of people. When we're talking about Latinos, it's important to say, we saw in the report many Trump supporters, but the majority are still in Florida going to go for Biden. But you do have a breakdown where there are more people voting for Trump. We saw this in 2016. You had 35% of all Latinos voting for Donald Trump, but 54% of Cubans within that group voting for Donald Trump.
Okay, and when you talk about Cuban Americans, they are really concentrated in Florida. But let's broaden this out a little bit, talking about the Latino vote in the U.S. It is incredibly important, but they don't vote as a monolithic group.
Absolutely not.
There's a lot of diversity within the Latino community in the U.S.
Absolutely.
How do they lean, though, politically as a group?
I mean, they lean Democrat.
Yeah.
We're looking, 2/3 of Latinos in 2016, regardless of their specific circumstances, voted for Hillary Clinton, and we're looking at about that same for Joe Biden. And Latinos are a growing population. 4 out of 5 of them are U.S. citizens. They have U.S. citizenship. They have voting rights. This is no longer the immigrant story, that stereotypical immigrant story we always hear. These are tried and true Americans who have been here for generations. Now, for groups such as Cubans and Venezuelans, as you heard in the report, this word socialism is a code word for them. You and I might hear socialism and think something very different. But for them, that's a scary word because they're coming from countries where socialism means political prisons, and it means taking land away from landowners and these kinds of things. And these are many of the people who lost out to those socialist revolutions in their countries and came to America to find a different way of life, to find what they would perceive as freedom. And that leans them more conservative. But again, we need to be careful to say it's still a minority group. But the question is, these, as we said at the top, these razor-thin margins, it might be enough to tip an election one way or another. The fact is we just don't know.
William, thank you so much. That was William Lucroft from our U.S. election team.